Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. So at long last, President Trump's Epstein birthday letter is in the hands of the House Oversight Committee, completely obliterating his claim that it didn't exist at all. And in typical Trump fashion, his reaction is to say aggressive litigation is on the way. White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt is sticking to the story that Trump didn't draw it, Trump didn't sign it, this is all Democrat hoax. And while this doesn't entirely work in an audio medium, but the letter in question is a crudely drawn female silhouette, the sort of poem/dialogue between a Donald and a Jeffrey, obviously Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, which ends with the phrase, "A pal is a wonderful thing, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret," followed by a signature that looks exactly like Donald Trump's, labeled as Donald J. Trump. As soon as it was publicly revealed, House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications, Taylor Buttigieg, was quick to call defamation. But honestly, while I can understand why they are quick to dismiss it as a forgery and a hoax, considering just how many things Donald Trump loves to put his signature on, there's more than enough samples for comparison to say it sure appears to be a pretty conclusive match. And obviously, just saying two signatures look identical isn't in itself evidence that it is without a doubt Donald Trump. But it does seem the more they try to convince people it isn't him, the more the case that it is seems to grow stronger. Trump had previously claimed that that couldn't possibly be his because he wouldn't draw a picture. He doesn't draw pictures. That claim is hurt just a little bit when you find that between 1995 and 2020, no less than 5 of his personal sketches were auctioned off, including a rudimentary drawing of the New York City skyline, which was auctioned off for $30,000 in 2005. The drawing he made of the Empire State Building auctioned off for $16,000 back in 2017, and something he called a money tree in 2020, which sold for $8,500. Now, these don't mean that Trump is going to bring an easel into the Oval Office and start painting or taking up some still life drawing, but it certainly doesn't help his claim that he, quote, doesn't draw pictures. While the art, if we could call it that, in the Epstein birthday card is a bit rudimentary, it certainly fits within the style of his previous drawings. What we have here is a drawing that looks a lot like drawings he's made, with a signature that looks very much like a signature that he's drawn on a lot of documents. So the claim from him and his team that it's a complete fabrication does not really seem to hold much water. At this point, it's kind of feeling like a presidential version of that Patrick Star meme, where he's asked if he's Patrick, which he says yes, and then he asks if this is his ID, which he says yes. So he's told, "I found this ID in this wallet, so this must be your wallet." And he says, "That's not my wallet." I mean, this is his drawing. That is his signature. I think that to deny that is ludicrous, but it's yet another example of the administration's attempt to tell the people to deny the truth of their eyes and what they see is not real. While the administration has scrambled to find some sort of bin to get their great leader out of this situation, it seems impossible to entirely extricate him from this Epstein situation. He very clearly is not just good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He was clearly privy to a lot of the goings-on with his buddy Jeffrey, likely being involved with them himself. While this letter on its own is purely just a piece of circumstantial evidence, it joins a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Donald Trump was more than likely more than just a passive observer, and actually more likely a participant in some of the abhorrent acts that Jeffrey Epstein is known to have perpetrated. I think one of the most disconcerting aspects of this is how little this is going to move the needle with his hardcore supporters. Despite their established disdain for those they deem to be pedophiles and child touchers, to a point where some were willing to bring guns into a private establishment because they believed that there was secretly a basement where the Democrats did bad things to kids. Shockingly, and perhaps not so shockingly, when it's one of their own, they are not so quick to decry him. This letter on its own would be the end of most other politicians' entire political career. They would be ousted in shame. But somehow, at least for the moment, Donald Trump is weathering this storm, has his supporters trying to find any excuse they can possibly find why this is not what it looks like. But I think to most observers, this is exactly what it looks like. And that is near conclusive proof that Donald Trump was involved with the Jeffrey Epstein situation, and he is complicit in some of those crimes. And as a result, there must be consequences. They can cry Democrat pet hoax, they can cry forgery all they want. But it's getting to a point where it is impossible for anyone to truly deny the reality in which we are finding ourselves, which is that the sitting president may have been involved in the trafficking of underage girls and possibly the abuse of those self-same girls. One thing that I find quite tragic is how many of those now grown-up victims still believe that Donald Trump will help them get justice when it seems clear that he is part of the injustice that was done to them. They're in essence expecting the criminal to prosecute his own crimes. And those victims undoubtedly deserve justice. But if they're looking to get justice from him, they are sadly going to come up short. But I guess the question is, what's next? Yes, we have a crude drawing of a girl with weird text talking about enigmas and secrets signed by a man who is almost definitely Donald J. Trump. Another piece in a wider picture. What does it actually do? For the deepest hardcore supporters, maybe not much. They're willing to accept just about any explanation they're given that will get their great leader off the hook and exonerate him. But for some, I think this may start to erode their confidence in his claims of innocence, because as evidence mounts on his guilt, it really does become harder and harder to believe it. It will eventually get to a point where, while they may not want to accept his role as a sexual abuser, will become nearly impossible to deny, and they will simply have to reconcile their choice to continue to be on his side. They for so long were so adamant about getting the child abusers out of government, and now they will have to realize that they elected one to president. As I've alluded to before, I do believe that this Epstein situation will be his undoing, because while he will never lose the support of his hardest core supporters, there will be many more who will not be able to get past this, nor should they. If these accusations do end up being proved to be conclusively true, it's not something that they should get past. Donald Trump will have been proven to be the monster he told his supporters to look out for, and when they realize that, they will turn on him. And I think once that does happen, the question is, will the Democrats be able to not fumble the ball when their enemy is down, or will they do what they usually do, which is kind of not much? Donald Trump thinks of himself as a self-styled king, but kings all have their downfall, and this could very well be his. And in a lot of ways, I think it's his own arrogance that is his real downfall. His belief that he could always keep his supporters duped, and they would never find out about what he was up to in the past. But the truth always comes to light, eventually. And honestly, he really couldn't have thought he could run from his past forever. Eventually, he was gonna get caught. He must have. Or like I said before, maybe not. Maybe he truly believed that he was so clever and so good at hiding that they would never find out the truth. And if they did, he could just say it was a hoax and he was being set up and it was all fake. And he's actually a good guy and the bad people are just having it out for him. But his numerous lies were going to catch up with him eventually. And it seems to me that's exactly what's happening. A victim of his own hubris. A man who thought that he was unassailable, that he was above all suspicion and all laws and he would never be caught. A mistake many criminals make, and they all find out in the end that there is no escape from justice. It may be delayed, but it's never escaped. This letter to Epstein reads as a sort of inside joke, a wink and a nod to each other, because they know what they've done together and they feel like they can talk that way to each other because they're not just best buddies, they're co-conspirators. They know what each has done and they're fine with it because they're in it together. While Jeffrey Epstein may have largely escaped earthly justice, Donald Trump is very much alive and will have to account the numerous crimes that he has committed. And I have to assume the stress of knowing that must be eating him up, as of course it should. I think the hammer of justice is slowly lowering onto Donald Trump, and there is no way to get out of it. No escape, nowhere to run. He's finished, and I think at some subconscious level, I think he knows that, and he is very, very afraid. All right, guys, so that's it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off another slice of news.